Hi everyone, welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be doing a book wrap-up. This is the first time that I'm doing a book wrap-up of some sorts. I just wanted to talk about the books that I've read and share with you guys like my thoughts and opinions and give like a little review of the books, I guess. So last year I did my reviews on Instagram. I posted pictures of the books and I wrote the review in the captions, and I just wanted to do something different this year. So here we are. Okay, so starting off in January, I only read one book that month, and that was Crank by Ellen Hopkins. I don't have the physical copy with me anymore. It's in the province. I'm so sorry I don't have it to show you guys because the structure of this book is so cool. I think I showed it in my 2024 TBR video, but I showed you guys like snippets of like some of its pages, and the way that this novel is structured is like, it looks like poetry, but it's not. It's just structured in that way. So each of the pages are like structured in like that kind of way, and it was just such an interesting way to read a novel. I've never read anything like that before, and it was just so cool. So this book is about a teenage girl. I think she's in her like senior year of high school or something. But yeah, it's about this girl who gets addicted to crank, which is, I didn't know this before, but apparently crank is meth. Kind of like how weed is a term for marijuana, so crank is like a term for meth. So it's basically about this girl, and it just shows her journey, like her life of being addicted to it, and yeah, it just shows how it affects her life, her mental health, her relationships with other people, and even with herself. If you are interested in reading this book, I will say to check out the content warnings and the trigger warnings, because there is substance abuse in this book. There's also, I think there's also like a little bit of drinking, and there's also self-harm, and there's also one scene of sexual assault. So if you don't want to read about any of those things, then this book is not for you. So I rated this book 3.75 stars just because I really liked the structure. That's the main thing that I really liked about this book, because it made the whole reading experience just much more, how do I explain this? It felt like you were in her mind and really experiencing and getting to see like what is happening to her, and you would just feel for her a lot more. But yeah, I really loved how it was written, and again, the structure of the book, it just made it so much more interesting. And again, because of how it's structured, you can read it in other ways. If you read it in like this certain way, it tells you like what's happening and stuff, but then when you read it like in a different way, there's like an added layer onto what's going on, especially what's going on in her head. So yeah, I enjoyed the structure of this novel. It was so cool. And again, you just really felt for her, for the character. There's just like a lot of like bad things happening to her, and you just feel for her, and you want her to like get some help. You just want to help her out. Yeah, anyway, I liked the book and I enjoyed reading it, but I did just give it a lower rating because it's a bit difficult to read, especially that sexual assault scene. That was I don't like reading those kinds of stuff, but anyway, it was still a good read for me. So yeah, that was the only book that I read in January. And then in February, I read 3 books. I read so much in February. I was so happy and proud of myself, although 2 of these books are like very short. So the first thing that I read in February is Bliss and Other Stories by Catherine Mansfield. I listened to the audiobook of this on Audrey, and I joined their like listen along thing. So yeah, I had a fun time listening to this book. Actually, also read along to this because I was just having a hard time like paying attention to certain parts. So I searched up the stories online. I forgot what website it was. I think it was UPenn who had all of the stories in their website. So just search up Bliss and Other Stories by Catherine Mansfield, and you'll find like an online version of all the stories. So I read that alongside listening to the audiobook on Audrey. I had a fun time listening to this book. It was so fun getting to participate in the read along. And yeah, I rated this book 4.5 stars. I loved listening to the audiobook. Whoever the narrator is, she was so good. I loved her voice, and how she also did the voice for the other characters. I found that very entertaining. But yeah, she did such a good job. I loved listening to her narrate this. And I also just love the stories. They're all very different. They're also set in, I don't know if it's just like early 1900s or like also late 1800s. I forgot what the time period is in this book. I think it was like early 1900s. But yeah, I loved the setting in the stories, and I love the characters. They're all very, very memorable people. And yeah, I just enjoyed the stories, and they all focused on women and how they are in like society, like how they fit in, how they're treated in society. And it was just so interesting reading about how women's lives were during that time, I guess. Yeah, and she just has like this way of putting in her own like commentary into it, with just like shedding light onto these things, on how women are treated and like seen. I just enjoyed it so much. I loved it. Again, rated it 4.5 stars. It was such a good time. And then the next book that I read is Whiskey Words and a Shovel. I think this is the first book. I actually have a physical copy of this. I was gifted this. So I actually rated this very low just because I just did not enjoy reading it. So this is like a poetry book. So this is how the pages look like. So I rated it this low because I just didn't like the voice of this person. And also just the poems just read like tweets to me. I didn't enjoy reading a lot of these because of that, because they read like tweets to me. But there were a couple that I liked because it was just different from the rest of the other ones, and those like made me think like, ooh, that was interesting. Again, I rated this 2.75 stars just because they read like tweets and not really much like poems to me. And again, with the voice of this person, there are some of the poems where it just felt like he was yelling at me. I don't know if that was the intention or not, but it felt like he was like yelling and like preaching, which I did not enjoy. And then there's also some poems in here that are just like about him and his like partner's like sex life, and I'm just like, was this really necessary to include in this book? I just felt like they came out of nowhere. Honestly, when I was reading, I was just like, why is this here? Like legit, there's like some poems where he's like talking about like eating her out and stuff, and I'm just like, is this really necessary? I don't want to read this. Why is this in here? It just felt like it had no place in this book, especially if this is supposed to be like something that's supposed to be like empowering for women and stuff like that. So it just made no sense to me, so that's why I rated it this low. So, and then the last book that I read in February was Ghost Girl by Tanya Hurley. So this book I actually borrowed from my younger sister. So I asked her if I could borrow it. She said yes, so I read it in February. And I thought I was gonna like it because I thought it was just gonna be like a fun, like cute story or something. And then when I started reading it, I was like, oh, this is not what I was expecting. I really hate the main character. She's just so annoying and like self-centered. Like she only thinks about herself, and it irritated me so much. She was basically like that throughout the whole book except for like the last few chapters or so, and it was just like it was just so annoying to read. And this took me so long to read just because I kept putting this book off because I didn't want to read it anymore. But I was just like, let's just finish it. It's fine. I rated this book 3.5 stars. I might change it later to like a lower star rating. So yeah, I did not enjoy it. This book is probably just like not for me. The characters are in high school, but they felt like they should be in middle school because everyone just felt so immature and like childish, and I just didn't enjoy reading it because of that. It was just so annoying. But yeah, anyway. So that was the last book that I read in February. And then for March, I read 2 books, and both of these are actually pretty short reads. The first book that I read in March is When I Bleed, Poems About Endometriosis by Maggie Bowyer. Again, I still don't know how to pronounce her last name. I'll figure it out. I really, really liked this book. I'm not really much of a poetry reader, but I did enjoy this one a lot because it just felt so like personal and like vulnerable and emotional. Like I can only imagine what like having endometriosis is like. The only thing that I know is that it gets very painful during periods, and how she described it is just like this excruciating pain that I can only imagine. I already like hate period cramps, so imagining like those kinds of period cramps, I can only like, I feel for her. Like, I'm so sorry that she has to go through that. Unlike this one, the poems just felt more genuine and like authentic, and just very, again, very vulnerable, like raw, emotional, and I just enjoyed that a lot. I empathize with her situation, because again, I can only imagine what having endometriosis is like. Also, if you are interested in reading this, I will say to also check out content warnings and trigger warnings, I guess, because she does talk about, oh my goodness, I only read this recently, but I'm like blanking. I don't remember if it's self-harm, but there are like mentions of that. Not really explicit, but like there are some mentions of that. And also, I don't know if it's like miscarriages or just like infertility issues, so if you don't want to read about those, this is not for you. And also with that, as someone who's not interested in having my own kids ever, I can again empathize with her situation, where because she has this condition, I guess, it is harder to have a baby, and you can really feel her like pain and like heartbreak of not being able to have a baby when she really wants to, and like that just like breaks my heart. Like, that's so sad. So yeah, I just really felt for her. And yeah, again, this book was just so emotional and like vulnerable, and I just enjoyed it. I loved it so much. And I rated this book 4.75 stars. This is my highest rated book this year so far. So yeah, I really enjoyed this one. And then the next book that I read, this is actually a reread for me. This is Life and All Its In-Betweens by Lia de Jesus. She's actually like an old classmate of mine in college. When I saw that she released this book back in like 2021, I bought the ebook version on Google Play Store and I read it then. Yeah, I downloaded the Google Play Books app on my phone thinking I could like buy some ebooks there, but apparently you just buy on the Google Play Store, and I don't have an Android right now, so I couldn't do anything. But I remembered that I bought her book and I found it in my library and I downloaded it and I reread it. This is a very short book. This is only, I believe, like 80 pages long. It's very short. How it's structured, it's kind of like poems, like poetry. So yeah, I rated this one 4.5 stars. I actually enjoyed the reread much more than I did my first read through. And it's only just because when I first read this book, I had never really read anything like it before. And now that I've read like more stuff that's kind of similar to it, like When I Bleed, and even this book, and last year I also read A Gentle Reminder by Bianca Sparacino. So this book is kind of very similar to those other books. So now that I have something to kind of compare it to, I enjoyed it a lot more in this reread. And also this time I read this out loud. It's just a very different experience reading these out loud. Oh, actually I also read the When I Bleed poems about endometriosis. I also read that one out loud. And I think reading them out loud just made it more like, it brought the emotions out more, I guess. It felt more emotional to me reading them out loud as opposed to just reading the words on the page in my head. So yeah, I don't know if I'm making any sense, but yeah, I'm just saying reading them out loud just brought out the emotions more, I feel like. So yeah, I just enjoyed reading this second time around. So yeah, I rated this book 4.5 stars. So yeah, those are all the books that I read in January, February, and March. I will be doing this quarterly, so expect another book wrap up in June. So yeah, I've never done this before, so I hope you enjoyed it. I know my reviews aren't very like detailed and all that stuff, but I hope you still enjoyed watching this anyway. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!